You know, a lot of things have gone by the name God down through the years. Zeus, Poseidon, Odin, the Christian God, the Jewish God, and this raises a question. What exactly is God? And we might think that the first place we would turn to answer this question is religion. And religion certainly has a lot to tell us about who God is and what he's like. But my expertise is in philosophy. And 2,500 years ago, there was a philosopher named Aristotle. He lived in Athens. And Aristotle thought that there had to exist a thing that he called the unmoved mover in order to explain the existence of movement and change in the world. And more than this, Aristotle thought that he could give arguments for why this unmoved mover has to exist in order to explain motion. And for Aristotle, the unmoved mover had to be what's known as pure actuality. And this meant that it had to be unable to change and outside of time and immaterial and infinite, in addition to being the source of all change. And the reason why this is important to our question in this video is that hundreds of years later, philosophers from the three main monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, looked at Aristotle's unmoved mover and said, hey, wait a minute, that looks a lot like our idea of God. After all, Aristotle said that the unmoved mover had to be changeless and timeless and immaterial and infinite. And we say that God has to be changeless and timeless and immaterial and infinite. Could these be one and the same being? Well, Aristotle says that there can only be one ultimate unmoved mover. And the Christians and the Muslims and the Jews say there can only be one God. That means that for both of them, there could only be one being, which is infinite and immaterial and timeless and changeless and the source and explanation of all that is. So, these must be one and the same being, they said. So what the Christians and the Muslims and the Jews started doing is they started using Aristotle's argument for the unmoved mover as an argument for God. And why wouldn't they if these two are one and the same being? And this started a tradition within these three monotheistic religions of trying to philosophically demonstrate the existence of God, using Aristotle as a model. Now look, obviously it doesn't prove that God exists to just point out that Aristotle argued that God exists. But it does add a certain gravity to the God debate, to know that there was a man who was able to philosophically reason his way to the existence of God without any contact with any of the three monotheistic religions. But he arrived at a being which looks remarkably similar to the Christian and the Muslim and the Jewish God. It at least shows that the God debate isn't something we can just hand wave away as not worth thinking about or somehow irrelevant. Because people a lot smarter than you or me have considered this question worthwhile. And we can see why based on how Aristotle argues his way to something that looks like God. So here's my proposition to you. Don't wave away the God debate. Don't think of it as somehow not worth thinking about or antiquated or irrelevant. Look into the question. Look into the arguments. Think about them deeply, and try to figure out an answer to the question of whether or not God exists. And if you're looking for a good way to do that, I'd recommend my YouTube channel. Every week, I come out with a new argument explaining some part of the God question. Either a video explaining one of the arguments for the existence of God, or one of the arguments in favor of atheism. And whether or not you end up checking out my content, I appreciate you watching this video. And thank you.